Welcome back, everyone, to Progressively Incorrect, one of the best podcasts in education, in my opinion. And my name is Zach Groeschel. I'm very excited to talk with Mike Schmoker. I've been waiting for this day for a long time, and I've brought up his name in many past episodes. But first, we do have to hear from our sponsors. The first is John Catt from Hachette Learning, which publishes some of the best evidence-based teaching books in education, including my book, Just Tell Them: The Power of Explanations and Explicit Teaching. They are amazing at getting teachers into the publishing space, and they are, in my view, very great at creating a portfolio of books that aligns with the messaging on this podcast. So I would check out John Catt if you're thinking of publishing a book, and look at the catalog of other books. It's really great reading in there. So check out the links in the show notes. The other thing is, you may know that I'm the director of Step Lab North America. And you're like, what the heck is Step Lab? I don't know what that is. It's an infrastructure for getting principals and instructional coaches to talk to each other, to do lots of drop-in and feedback type of activities, and all of this based on the science of how kids learn and effective explicit instruction. If that sounds wild, give me a call and I'll show you what I'm talking about, and it might help you to get instructional coaching and effective teaching up and running in a school that really needs it. Let's just move on from all this and go right into my conversation with Mike. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing swell. How about you?
I'm very excited. People are going to know you from the links and the stuff and the Crayola curriculum, but maybe you could introduce yourself more formally for us.
I've written some books, some articles, been in all 50 states and a large handful of countries, talking about how to improve education and doing my best, I guess, to convince people that large gains come from ordinary people doing fairly ordinary things, or seemingly ordinary things, that pay off both quickly and in the long run. And there's barrels of evidence that point to that prospect.
What you're known for, because I've posted a lot of pictures of results 2.0 now, like the different pages of really interesting quotes, is I think a directness and a sort of a cut through the BS sort of approach to how you explain things. What does that come from? I mean, did you work in kitchens? Like, what is that? What is that? Where do you think
How'd
that
you
comes
know?
from?
How'd you know?
Is that true though?
I wonder how many of us spend a lot of time in our adolescence and beyond, bussing tables or washing dishes, or even me waiting tables at Bob's Big Boy, which was a disaster for someone like me. I guess my tendency to be fairly direct, it may come, honestly. I don't know that anyone's ever asked me that. It might come from my mom, who is pretty straightforward and clear and a little on the blunt side. A lot of educational writing and speaking, I think it's too quick to placate and to sort of talk around issues, like the fact that there's many very, very common practices that occur in almost every classroom in America that are just awful practices. And if they're really hurting kids and they're holding teachers back, keeping them from being good at what they do and keeping schools from getting better, shouldn't we just come out and say, for instance, that, worksheets are everywhere? Every audience I poll tells me that over 50% of the time a kid spends in school is a worksheet. Now, a lot of those worksheets these days are also on a screen, but they're basically the same thing. Shouldn't we be calling that stuff out? I don't want to sound superior, but I wish more educators and educational writers would say, look, this is the way it is. There's way too many worksheets. There's nowhere near enough curriculum, reading, writing, discussion, and there sure as hell isn't very much explicit step-by-step instruction. And our teachers aren't even trained to do that kind of thing. So, call it out, make it clear. No sense of being judgmental about it, but these are facts. The sooner we reckon with them, the faster we'll have better schools.
I recently did a book study for results now, and it created a new legion of fans for you. I think it was a fun deal. And in that, we all shared our stories of either observing teaching or ourselves making certain mistakes. And the one that came up in my mind was what I call the peanut butter and jelly lesson, where I've seen this done in multiple places. I may have done it myself. Instead of teaching children how to create sort of an outline or an overview or a set of procedural instructions in writing, you basically have them write how they should do how the teacher should do a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then she messes up while she does the peanut butter, and then it's a whole bunch of laughs, and that kind of lesson, why, like,
Uh,
well intended, also
uh,
has all of these consequences and things. I mean, when you go
mm,
around, and,
mm.
and everyone shared stories like this, like, why would I do that? When you go around to schools, even these days, do you see this kind of peanut butter and jelly lesson or sort of Crayola curriculum still kind of being a part of the fabric of teaching?
Yeah, yeah. The Crayola curriculum, it's been 20 years since that article was written. I'm astonished and yet not so astonished that it persists. You walk through classrooms, and if you walk through classrooms with superintendents, assistant superintendents, principals, they, for the first time often, are seeing just how off base most instruction is. And if I'll even ask them, I'll say, as we go into the next 3 to 5 classrooms, just ask yourself. You don't have to know or have memorized the entire curriculum, let's say, but just ask yourself in each classroom, does this look like something that would come from an organized curriculum that specifies the most important things kids ought to learn? Within 3 or 4 classrooms, they notice, no, this couldn't possibly, this particular lesson, it's just a worksheet with a bunch of questions on it. And the kids are sitting in groups because we have to have them in groups all the time instead of some of the time, which is very effective. We have them in groups and they're sort of slowly making their way through these worksheets. And you look at it and you think, could this possibly be built into the curriculum, this worksheet? Is there even any specific topic or skill that's supposed to be learned on this given day? And I always like to say, within even 3 classrooms, the conversations I have in the hallway indicate that pretty much the gang is in agreement with me that we don't really know what's going on in classrooms, and therefore what's going on in there is not of the highest quality.
Why do people get so defensive about this?
Well, I mean, that's a big human nature question, isn't it? I mean, when you've been doing something a long time, and even if it's something that's not particularly effective, but everybody's doing it. No one likes to be called out and told this thing that you've done out of a conscientious heart because everyone else does it, and you've never gotten feedback that told you this is something you should not do or do less of. You're going to feel defensive because you feel like you've done your honest best, and someone's judging you. They have a right to feel that way to a point. The better question, and the question right behind it, ought to be, why are they doing things that almost anyone who looks at evidence would call out as not being evidence-based? Like, and I like to kind of use this sort of rough statistic. I'll ask my audiences, I'll say, just for a moment, pair up. Ask your pal next to you what percentage of the time a kid is filling out a worksheet. And they all come in with percentages high, very high, between 50 and 80%. I said, we all are doing this. We know it, we see it. Could that possibly be good for kids? And they agree that it isn't. And then you say, well, why is that the case? Because people in organizations tend to do what's always been done and what everybody else does until and unless people like you who write books that discuss many of the same things I recommend come along and say, look, there's excellent evidence that there are other vastly superior practices. That when we say superior, by the way, let me interrupt myself to say they're not just superior, they're superior by massive margins. The moment, for instance, a student or a whole classroom is taught by a teacher who, instead of using worksheets, says, here's an objective today. Here's the knowledge I want you to acquire, or here's the thinking skill, or scratch thinking skill. That's too amorphous. Here's the paragraph I want you to write on this particular content or subject, and I'm going to take you through steps between which each step I'm going to check for understanding by just wandering around the room, seeing who is and isn't getting it. And if a good enough handful of you aren't getting it, I've got to reteach, re-explain, or break it down into smaller steps. The moment we do that, you don't just get slightly better results, you get 2 or 3 times as many students learning a lesson. So when teachers have the benefit of someone like you coming along to say, here's explicit instruction, let me introduce you to and train you in how to execute this stuff, they're going to be so much more productive, happier with their work, and Lord knows their kids are going to be better off.
I actually see you going into schools and you sort of facilitating these conversations with leaders
Hmm.
and there being at the beginning a lot of confidence that they are doing all of these things. I
Mm.
laughed aloud at one part of your book when you were like, they always tell me how many awards they've won, right? There's all these awards, right?
Yeah.
Which like,
Sad to say.
like we live in a world where like kind of so-called progressive or romantic education is like the dominant paradigm. And so I'm like, who's getting those awards? I'm guessing people that don't do a lot of great focused teaching. But they tell you about all the awards, and then you sort of through Socratic questioning, through facilitation, you get them all to basically say, we have a lot of work to do here. I mean, is that kind of what happens?
They do. And yet, and this is an entirely separate subject, but connected to what we're talking about, there needs to be inside and outside pressure to do something more than we're doing now. It's one thing for me and for these leaders to see classroom after classroom that real improvement is needed. It's another thing for them to, in the coming days, subsequent days and weeks, to actually pull the gang together and say, all right, these are the things we're going to focus on like crazy. And we're going to train you in them, and we're going to monitor them and their implementation in the school to make sure that they're happening and that you're getting better at them. That's a bigger leap for us. And that's going to require pressures from both inside and outside that we've not yet been able to manufacture.
I think that the curriculum piece is the one that is
Mm,
most glaring to me these days,
yeah.
where it's like you can't even find it on the website. You start asking around and you start going, where does it live? Where is it written down? And you find out it's living in every teacher's head as they create it, right? Is that, I mean,
Mm.
that seems to be almost universally true. And is that your experience as well?
Yeah, well, it really is. And again, imagine if teachers are either tacitly or one way or another getting the message that you can wake up every day and decide what you want to teach. And though people will even refer to the curriculum, there's a funny irony in that, isn't there? We say, oh, the curriculum, blah, blah, blah. And for them, that means something so squishy that it allows them to teach just about, as I say, anything they want on a given day. When that's the case, you can walk into the same hallway, the same grade level in a school, and you see completely different things going on day to day, week to week. In some cases, with those teachers saying, well, yes, we're teaching the curriculum, but we teach it in our own way. What they really want, if you press them and if you kind of get below the surface, they crave what Linda Darling Hammond, who's an eminent professor at Stanford, you might know, says every teacher deserves and cannot be effective until they're given nice ordinary terms. Listen to this: a schedule of what to teach and when. Now, that doesn't mean, I want to clarify, doesn't mean every day, every teacher is teaching exactly the same thing. It doesn't have to be that precise. And it doesn't mean scripted. I'm not a fan of scripted programs, I must say. But it means that a teacher ought to know in the next week, give or take, I really do need to be covering this content, teaching writing skills, and or giving students opportunities to to closely read, discuss, and write about this content, that literature, etc. They need that, they crave it, but we haven't given it to them yet. Despite, I don't know, what do you think, Zach? Despite, isn't there pretty wide knowledge that curriculum, having a decent curriculum, and I say decent because it doesn't have to be perfect, a decent schedule of what to teach and when, don't you think that knowledge is somewhat general?
Yeah.
Most educators would at least concede it in a conversation.
And then just the idea that like it would be really hard to say this is a school without one. You know what I mean? It's such a
Yeah.
like it's sort of like that's just something it's assumed by the public should be in place given that an institution exists around teaching and learning. It's such a
And I appreciate you mentioning the public because, when Bob Marzano came up with his research is not the only research that points to the fact that curriculum is probably the single largest factor. You get that in place, all kinds of good stuff ensues. And he calls it what does he call it? A guaranteed and viable curriculum. The guaranteed means any member of the public could say, Zach, you're the principal at my kid's school. I don't know. I've heard rumors that the math or the history teacher teaches the different ones teach a very different set of topics and skills. Could you please set my mind at rest? And you'd be able to guarantee that member of the public or that parent that yes, it might not be 100%, but it's close enough. And your kids, you don't have to worry too much about enormous variance, one teacher to the next. We ain't there yet. We're not there yet.
I'd love to give the listeners a kind of a practical framework or set of tips here because you've talked about and we kind of passed around some of these resources in the book club group around Results Now 2.0 around how to just kind of get a curriculum mapped in a very small, very short amount of time. Given
Hmm.
like if we all can
Yeah.
agree on this, why don't we just do this really quickly? It's not going to be perfect. There's provisional things we're going to have to put in place.
Yep.
There's topics that we might not want to touch, but let's get something down. What does that process look like when you lead it or when you've seen it led?
Well, this is good. You just did some of my work because it doesn't have to be perfect. Yes, there are controversial topics. Don't put off the completion of curriculum until you resolve all those issues. Decide initially on what you all agree on. Look at any set of standards, and I'm not talking about language arts at the moment. Forget language arts just for a sec. If you look at any subject, start with your state standards if you want, or the now national science standards, whatever. Look at them, and I like to say, take a pencil and quickly, like 15 minutes, go through and just put a little mark next to the ones that you think we just have to teach these. Then let's say you and I are the science course team for a certain grade level, certain subject. We look at what we marked and we find out, oh, we have quite a bit in common. We talk for another literally 15, 20 minutes, maybe. You can do this fast if you want to and say, okay, let's look at what we agree on, but then maybe grab a few more and add that to the mix. Somewhere in there, just roughly pencil in an approximation of about how many days it might take to teach either a standard or a little family or cluster of standards. If when you add those up, it comes to more than about 150 days, school days, you probably have too much. So you might have to reduce a little. I've seen people sit down and with a little bit of guidance get this work done in 45 minutes to an hour. If you want to take 2 hours, go ahead, but don't take 2 years. Don't even take 2 months because you lose momentum and the whole project tends to kind of become diffuse and disappears. But have that kind of a session. And then the next obvious thing to do is say, well, what sequence do we teach them in? How many of these topics and standards can we fit into first grading period? Okay. And second and third and fourth. All of this work can be done in a couple of hours. In math, that's all you have to do. In almost every other, and that's what they did, for instance, at my wife's school. And in literally 2 hours in August, they came up with a math curriculum, which was the launching pad, and they refined it over time at subsequent meetings. They monitored its implementation. And in the next 2 years, I went to the awards assembly where they were awarded for being one of 3 schools that made the largest secondary gains in the state of Arizona. It was the launching pad. Suddenly, people were teaching the most important stuff. They knew what to teach. They knew when, which is to say, about how much time to devote to each of those topics. And they actually taught the most important subjects and felt some accountability one to the other to actually teach them. Now, that's math. You have to add another layer, and that is text, say in the adjacent column. Or you have text from actually, I contradicted myself. In math, you want that next column to have resources or pages from the textbook, which the team at that point, it can change, resources and textbook pages that best match the topics and standards you're teaching. It doesn't have to be the whole book, just the stuff that best fits with those. Now, that's basically everything but English language arts. English language arts, I can say pretty quickly. There's a lot I could say, but in the time we have, list the works the students are going to read, and then make sure you have discussions and writing assignments, formal and informal, about just about every one of those. Make darn sure you have a generous amount of novels, nonfiction books, poems, short stories, articles. Put those in one column. And in the next one, have good questions that inform the close reading, the discussion, and the writing. And you're on your way. And notice I didn't mention look at your state standards. If you teach writing and teach close reading in any meaningful way, you're going to be probably capturing the very best of the English language arts standards and ignoring that, that plethora of minutia that now gets in the way of good English language arts instruction. That's maybe a longer answer to a short question than you expected, but there's
No,
three.
it's perfect because I think A, schools don't know this is a problem or don't care. B, they think they need to all become curriculum designers, which
Mm.
which is this is another part is how do we actually use the materials that are already that are already well designed effectively. But
Mhm.
we just need to we just need to get this down on paper as in like these are the best like buckets of things that we need to use our time for, and you get them down on paper, and now let's iterate, now let's use those to occasion more discussions, more PLC work, more professional development. But let's, as adults, let's get down to brass tacks and write it down. It seems like really appealing to me in a lot of ways.
Well, yeah, and it shouldn't. People need to be reminded that when you do these things, you don't you got to know that this effort won't just pay off. It will pay off mightily. All the examples of schools that I share that I've really gotten to know are the ones that did these things and really focused intently on them and on almost nothing else. And that exclusive, intense focus pays off like crazy. You should start to feel the results literally within days and weeks and anticipate year-end measurable results. And I would just throw this in on curriculum. There's, of course, a bit more to be said on that topic. The step-by-step process for it all is in books like Focus, my other book, the third edition of which is going to come out in February. But I lay this out in simple detail, learned as much as anything from schools that I've seen succeed. In every case, when they created this kind of curriculum and did a couple of other things in many cases, they saw large increases in the number of students who succeeded within one school year.
It's exciting. I'm definitely going to put some links in the show notes for the listeners because Focus is coming out in February. It might be that this podcast is just before that, so let's see how
Sure.
that works out.
What do you
Um,
got?
and a lot of people asking that question. I guess we'll kind of end on talking about leadership because I think what ends up happening is I think principals are experiencing so much administrative bloat in some of these
Hmm.
districts. They're just like these webs of all of these bean counters and pencil pushers in all of these really large school districts, and principals have lost the ability in some cases to cut through the noise and just lead their schools. And so what advice do you have when you're in that situation? And you essentially just say, I can't run a curriculum mapping thing. The teachers won't come and I can't make them come. And the school district says we're doing this dumb thing. How do you manage that situation?
Well, a couple things to say on that. First of all, not everyone can learn this. It would be great if school leaders and district leaders just told themselves, I have to carve out a certain amount of time for my highest priorities. So you determine what those are, and you make sure that you're going to devote at least an adequate amount of time to those priorities. Number two, don't try not to feel overwhelmed going in that you're going to have to devote 20 or 30 hours a week to this. When I say intensive, I mean you've got to carve a good 5, 7 hours out every week to do these kinds of things, knowing, for instance, that any principal who walks through a school after, for instance, their faculty's been trained in explicit instruction. If they just walk through, if they say, on a certain schedule, I'm going to walk through 10 classrooms at a time, and I'm not even going to be in there that long, but I'm going to be able to see within a minute or two, and I absolutely believe that minute or two is very revealing, whether or not the teachers have mastered those elements of, and are actually implementing those elements of effective instruction, and then report back. Always start with the whole faculty. I tend to have a prejudice toward reporting back and modeling and repeating professional development at faculty meetings, at regular meetings, not just those 3 times a year PD days. Those are okay. They're not the real meat. The real meat is those frequent, regular opportunities where you have, say, to watch. Zach is he's our in-house instructional expert. He's going to do literally a 5-minute modeling of checking for understanding and describe it even for the third or fourth time, because you guys are getting this aspect of it, but not so much that aspect of it. We're going to keep repeating those things and monitoring for its implementation until you all got it. Now, when you reach that point where some people aren't doing it, getting it, that's when you take individuals aside and you say, you need a little extra training. You're going to spend an hour or two with Zach during one of our early release days or whatever it might be, and you're going to demonstrate to each other. You're not just going to be told what to do or not do. You're going to demonstrate and model for all of us that you can, in fact, do these simple things like circulate to check for understanding briefly and efficiently, reteach, break a complex skill or step down into 2 or 3 to make it simpler, etc. Just dog it, repeat, stay focused. And again, don't take on too much. And as cavalier as this might sound, become good at ignoring or placating those who lay unreasonable mandates on you from the state or the district office. Reduce the time you spent on compliance if that compliance doesn't contribute to student outcomes.
Yeah.
Easier to say than do.
No, no. Well, I mean that's what I end up saying to a lot of people. It's like, do you have a way to downplay that aspect of your role and so you can emphasize this? I'm sure you do. And weirdly enough, I was just at another school with the same constraints, and that principal was able to do that by reallocating and repurposing some of their time towards this, and
They really can.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And we need to tell, like you are doing, we need to tell them that. You almost need to say, look, okay, we're all adults here. Are you sure you couldn't maybe just do this and this in a kind of quick and dirty fashion and you'll be just fine? Don't be absurdly conscientious about stuff that doesn't matter.
Yeah. I value your time. I really do appreciate you coming on the podcast. Mike, we could talk for forever. Um uh Tell me what's next for you? What's next, do you feel like, when it comes to, gosh, all these reform efforts that are taking place and the future of this uncertain thing called education? I'm very excited. So the floor is yours.
The future is a little murky right now, I think. We don't have NCLB, which was good and not always so good, as we know. ESSA, didn't pay off quite the way we wanted it to. The one thing I kind of have some amount of hope in, let me rephrase, I do have hope in this. And it's the theme of Results Now 2.0, and that is that if a critical mass of educators and people interested in education saw just how big the gap between common practice and good practice was. It's not small, it's massive. I love the work of Eric Kalen's and the title of his book, that education is upside down. We need to get the word out that our reckoning with phonics is only the tip of the iceberg. In almost every area, literacy, curriculum, and effective instruction, which for me, if that isn't obvious even in the last half hour, I regard those as the big levers. I don't think anything compares to them. And the most effective, successful teachers, schools and teachers, individual teachers sometimes, I know, were able to implement, though, master and implement some version of those meaningfully and get great results within a year. Those three elements, if we got the word out, that those three elements count massively, and yet we don't do them, we don't implement them in the vast majority of our schools, I think that would help. It would wake us up to a big problem, but it has to be accompanied by hope. And hope comes from knowing, and maybe more and more of us making vivid, that when you do those things, you don't have to wait long to see big results. The sooner we can get both the negative and the positive out to school boards, I don't know, legislators, parents, the public, and educators in general, and this is a big reach, maybe the PD community and our teacher and leader preparation programs. If we could just get that word out, if enough of us got that word out, I think we could not just move the needle, but maybe move it pretty quickly.
And it's the work that excites me. I'm excited. I haven't been into the game as long as you have, but I'm looking forward to what we can put together. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Listeners, be sure to check out the show notes. The links are pretty great reading, and reach back out to me and we can start a conversation as well. Pass this podcast along to a principal, a faculty of ed member, parent, and let's spread the word on what needs to happen in education. Thank you so much, Mike, and take care.
You're so welcome. Same to you. Bye, Zach.